Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today indoors when you got this beautiful spring day outside. So I applaud you for your interest in local government. Today is April 9th, 2024. This is a City Council voting meeting. We'll start off with the introductions. Mayor Pro Tem?
Announcements?
Announcements.
We have a few announcements today. So April is Water Awareness Month. You can do your part to be water smart. Look for daily conservation tips on the city's Facebook page. For more information about living water smart, including rebates for a variety of water-saving appliances, go to PrescottWater.com. Number 2, the City of Prescott will host a statue dedication ceremony honoring local World War I hero Lieutenant Ernest A. Love on Wednesday, April 10th at 1 o'clock in front of the Prescott Regional Airport Terminal located at 6600 Airport Drive. The event is open to the public. The Ernest A. Love American Legion Post No. 6 Honor Guard will present the colors. And there will be comments from Mayor Phil Good. The statue, created by nationally renowned local artist Bill Nebecker, will greet visitors to the Prescott Regional Airport. Please join us as we honor our hometown hero, Ernest A. Love. Number 3, Yavapai County is hosting a community meeting to discuss the mines along Senator Highway on April 18th, which is a Thursday, 2024, from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Yavapai College Prescott Campus, Jim and Linda Lee Performing Arts Center, 1100 East Sheldon Street, that's supposed to be Prescott, Arizona. Various agencies, including the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, the ADEQ, will be in attendance to speak and answer questions from the community. ADEQ looks forward to presenting on permitted facilities and remediation projects in the area. For more information on this event, please contact Supervisor Mary Mallory's office. You're to speak to Cynthia Gentle at 928-771-3209. They also left a message this morning that you will be able to live stream this. If you go to their website, they haven't figured out how to do it quite yet, but that's going to be coming up as well. So you'll be able to watch it online. The last announcement is an announcement for Prescott High School. They need your help. They're trying to put on a sober grad night. They're about $3,000 short for the cost of the evening for the student. It's been very, very successful. It's gone on for many years. If you'd like to sponsor a student for $45, go to the Prescott High School website and click on the PTA button and sponsor a student for $45, or maybe a few students. It's a great organization. I hope you all get involved. And that's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to have the city clerk read a series of decorum guidelines that we've established. So, City Clerk, please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Late last week, the City of Prescott issued a release in regard to public participation at City of Prescott public meetings. I'm going to read through that now and just set the stage for what the expectation is in this meeting and all City of Prescott Council and Board, Commission, and Committee meetings. The City of Prescott invites and appreciates public participation in council, board, commission, and committee meetings. In the spirit of objective analysis and civil debate, we will follow a process format to accomplish sharing information in a productive and informative manner. Meetings and discussions will generally follow the following format: staff report and presentation, council questions and discussion, applicant or outside organization presentation and discussion, further council questions and discussion, public comment, and a council vote when applicable, or council discussion and wrap up with direction to staff. With decorum and respect in mind, city staff and the council kindly request that the public wait for their opportunity to speak until the public comment portion of discussions. We ask that you debate the proposal and presented item and not criticize staff or presenters. Any public outbursts, such as booing or heckling, will hear the gavel from the mayor or the board, commission, and committee chair asking for decorum. The city reserves the right to escort disruptive individuals out of the meetings. During public comment, members of the public are expected to present new information and ideas when addressing the council. If a speaker simply repeats previous comments, the mayor or chair may limit their comment time. If a speaker verbally attacks any of the presenters, they may be gavelled and admonished, and if they continue to attack the mayor or board commission committee chair, may request that they be escorted from the chambers. Finally, applause should be limited to recognition during presentation and proclamation portions of our meetings, and excessive displays in support or opposition to items will not be permitted during council or board commission and committee discussions.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. We'll now have an invocation from Rabbi Susan Shannerman from Temple B'rith Shalom, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll move into roll call and presentations.
Mayor Good and council members, thank you for allowing me to offer this prayer as a representative of Temple B'rith Shalom, the largest synagogue in the Quad Cities. We have over 100 family units. We welcome any of you to a Friday night Shabbat service anytime. I have with me little blue square pins with a hashtag in the corner. These symbolize a national movement called the Foundation Against Anti-Semitism. They are for Jews and non-Jews alike to speak out against hatred and stand with the Jewish community as our nation addresses anti-Semitism every day. I will leave the pins here. Please take as many as you like and wear them proudly. Spirit of life and love, divine spirit which resides in all. We do not always understand each other. We do not always speak or listen carefully. We often find it difficult to look beyond ourselves to our common purpose, and we may cause suffering to each other and ourselves. In this time together, let us be reminded that we seek to understand each other. We seek to speak to each other in truth with compassion. We seek to listen to each other in love with caring. We seek the common good and a life lived in accord with our highest aspirations. We call upon the living Spirit in each of us to make it so, and let us say, Amen.
Please join me in pledging allegiance to a great republic this beautiful flag represents.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Good,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Cantelmi,
Here.
Councilwoman Fruworth,
Here.
Councilman Gambogi,
Here.
Councilman Montoya,
Here.
Councilman Moore,
Here.
and Councilmember Rusing.
Here.
All are present.
Very good. And next will be a presentation regarding the Yavapai County Extension with the University of Arizona. Matt, you're on.
All right. Is there a way I can control the slide deck? Okay. Mayor, Council, thank you so much for having me today. I truly appreciate the time. I'll do my best to act with civility and decorum going forward. So I wanted to speak with you all. Some of you were kind enough to come visit me last week, and I got to tell you a little bit about what we do. But the reason I've come here today is because there is a lot of talk about what's going on at the rodeo grounds and the future of the rodeo grounds. And what I find in my tenure here as the director of Yavapai County Cooperative Extension is that most people don't know what goes on the rodeo grounds, and that is the home of Yavapai County Cooperative Extension here in Prescott. So I thought I'd take the time, and I appreciate the time to come and tell you what's going on. So this is a little bit about what we did and what we do here. Am I backwards, forwards? Power? We got power. Okay, so just go ahead and talk. So Yavapai County Cooperative Extension has been around, my guess is, ever since the territorial times. Most people don't know what cooperative extension does, and we are not a co-op, right? We do not collect vegetables and then sell them at a discounted price. The reason we are called cooperative extension is that we are funded cooperatively by the state government, the county government, and the federal government. And that came with the Land Grant University Act and the Smith-Lever Act of 1912. What our mission to do is to take information from the university, objective science-based information, and to broadcast that to the communities here in Yavapai County. Now, every state has a land-grant university. It happens to be the University of Arizona in Arizona, and every county has cooperative extension. So cooperative extension is not new or special to Yavapai County, but I would say that our cooperative extension is especially unique. So Yavapai County Cooperative Extension is made up of 3 primary programs. That would be Agriculture and Natural Resources, 4-H, and Family and Consumer Health Sciences. Most people are at least familiar with 4-H, although a few of them had no idea that it was part of Cooperative Extension. 4-H has existed longer than longer than Cooperative Extension, but joined us when Cooperative Extension started. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Started in 1914, right, just after Arizona received statehood. So we'll go forward. Right now, we've kind of gone through there. So here's where cooperative extension is in the state of Arizona. You can see our office there in Prescott, and we have a satellite office in Camp Verde as well. So we do our best to serve both sides of the Black Hills to make sure that everyone's treated equally. We also have federally recognized tribal extension programs in different reservations throughout the state. So we have a presence all over the state of Arizona. Here are some of the programs, as I told you about. I was talking about 4-H, and the interesting thing about 4-H is most people think when they think 4-H, they are thinking about livestock and kids, and that's absolutely true, and livestock is the flagship of what we do. But as Prescott and surrounding areas become more urbanized, not every kid has an acre to grow livestock. So 4-H is way more than just livestock. It's all about leadership, civic engagement, public speaking. And when you meet a kid from 4-H, like Councilmember Roosing, you know because they look you right in the eye, they know how to talk with confidence, and they're really impressive people at even very young ages. I work particularly in agriculture and natural resources, so we do a lot of residential and commercial horticulture. We have our Master Gardener program that a lot of people are interested in. We do rangeland, livestock, and programs that might even be more pressing to urban communities like this are family and consumer health sciences that I'll talk about just a touch more. So these are the folks that I work with in cooperative extension. They are all leaders in their own right, and I would wager to say that none of them is familiar with the concept of a 40-hour work week. When I came in, I said, you know, I'm going to be the first one in and last one out, and that's how I'll lead. And that was a difficult act to follow. So now I'm just trying to be the best leader I can. We have our advisory board there on the bottom, and it's made up of residents of Yavapai County. We try very hard to have a representative from each district and representatives from the different programmatic areas that we have. So we have master gardeners, 4-H leaders, people in nutrition, horticultural instructors from Yavapai College, small farmers, and ranchers. Here's what we did in cooperative extension, just so you have an idea of our impact in 2023. In 2022, we had about 150 4-H members. In 2023, we've doubled that number to 293, and I think last count it was 300. We visited 1,600 students, mostly in Prescott Unified School District, and had 63 4-H members attend our camp on Mingus Mountain, the Harold and Mitzi James 4-H camp, if you're not familiar with that one. And people come, that includes folks from the launch pad, Game and Fish, lots and lots of different attendees come to the James camp, and that's a University of Arizona camp that we provide. We also train kids in the quality care of animal certification so that they can show their animals safely when it comes to the county fair and things like that. Family and Consumer Health Sciences, these are the programs that are concerned with food safety and health and making sure our children are taken care of, right? So when you go to a restaurant in Yavapai County, and the food doesn't make you sick, thank Cooperative Extension, because our program is that program that trains your food protection managers, and every restaurant in the county has to have at least one. Right? We work with supplemental nutrition assistance programming. That's called Arizona Health Zone. So we work with Yavapai County Health Services with that one, right? So we're teaching people that are on supplemental incomes how to use their supplemental dollars to make healthy choices and to stay active throughout their lives. National Diabetes Prevention Program, where we take people through an entire year and help them make better healthy choices. In the same way that I'm very proud of the work that we do with food safety, I'm very proud of the work that we do with child health care consultation. So this is part of the Quality First program, the First Things First program here in Arizona. Schools, I should say actually, care centers, because we work primarily 0 through 5. The health department does everything above that. We worked with care centers 0 through 5 to make sure that these are healthy places, safe places to take our kids for childcare, right? So we have childcare health consultants. We served 38 locations this year. They go to these locations and they observe and look at the situation, look at the quality of healthcare of childcare that's going on. And if things are great, awesome. If things need improvement, we help them improve, and we provide training and services to make that happen. We also recently added a financial literacy education program, which we're very happy to provide. As far as my forte, agriculture and natural resources goes, that's part of the Master Gardener program, which has brought 13,000 hours primarily to the Prescott area of community service and giving presentations throughout the county. We have 2 help desks, so if you have problems, generally residential horticulture problems, but I also deal with larger producers as well. I deal with growers out in Paulden and Chino Valley when they have problems. They come in, they can ask us about whatever sorts of problems they're having, and we address those problems and help them find solutions. We have a Yavapai County plant database, which is unlike any other in the state. I've had other places, other counties call me and say, hey, does Mojave County have a plant database? No. They don't. We're the only one of its kind. That may not, if you're not a botanist or a rangeland manager, that may not be important. But if you are a rancher in the area, it's extremely important to know what your horse just ate. Another program we're extremely proud of is the 3-Forest Monitoring Agreement, and that came across because there was an issue after the droughts of 2020 and 2021. Ranchers were asked to cut their herds by local land managers, and that was extremely tough. And so those ranchers came to the University of Arizona, and we did the work that I believe we always do, which is act as moderators between 2 parties, right? And we came to a solution that worked for everybody. We wrote a large grant. My counterpart in Mojave County wrote a large grant to hire on range technicians to go out with land managers and permittees so that everyone could agree they were looking at the same issues. And on top of that, what it really tends to do is build trust and relationships between those 2 factions, right? So we've done a lot of good work for the ranching community as well, which I believe is the heart of agriculture in Prescott and Yavapai County. I personally am a viticulturist. I've worked in the wine industry for over a decade, and so I partner often with Yavapai College and their viticulture and enology program and serve the entire state delivering viticulture education to that $55 million industry that we have. We also receive several grants, which we administer through to the public. One of those was a water efficiency grant. We got $45 million from the state legislature to work with growers throughout the state, though lots of Yavapai County residents are working with us as well. And the purpose of that is to help them if they are all flood irrigation, which is not a particularly efficient form of irrigation. We are giving them $1,500 an acre if they can prove on paper that it'll save them 20% efficiency in water, up to $1 million grant. We're also going farther, and I'll say I'm proud to say that Yavapai County is actually using more of this farmer apprenticeship grant than any other county in the state. And that's a grant that we are giving $10,000 per apprentice, not necessarily per farm. A farm can have multiple apprentices, but in the way we use that is to put experienced farmers with new apprentices that want to learn how to farm, right? It is expensive to farm, and it's hard to learn to farm, so we've brought a lot of different parties together with those kinds of programs. Here's some of the numbers and things we did this year. We contacted directly, we worked with over 18,000 residents in Yavapai County, almost 18,000 hours of community service valued at over $500,000 in value to the county. I told you about the size of our 4-H clubs. There's 11 clubs and 300 youth with 65 volunteers that work with them, 52 outreach visits, which supplement STEM education primarily in Prescott Unified School District schools. 117 food establishment managers were trained in order to keep our restaurants safe. Over 2,000 SNAP Ed contacts were made. And what I'll say is the value that we provide is that for every dollar that Yavapai County gives us, because we are cooperatively funded, as I mentioned, we bring almost $4.50 of value back to the community. If you add in the value of the volunteer service that is done as well, it's almost $8 for every dollar. So I would say that is fiscally responsible investment of funds when it comes to the dollar sign. So I appreciate y'all letting me take a very small amount of time to talk to you about cooperative extension and let you know what's going on at the Prescott Rodeo Grounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. I took that tour with you recently, and it certainly broadened my understanding of University of Arizona Extension and all the different impacts that you have throughout the county. So I would encourage everyone to reach out to Matt, maybe take a tour and see firsthand what they're doing for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to proclamations. Stand By Me, Be Drug Free will be presented by Councilman Gambogi.
Members of Matt Force here.
Kelly Lee.
Toby.
Ivy.
Whereas Matt Force has proclaimed April 15th to the 20th, 2024 to be Stand Up With Me, Be Drug Free Week, and whereas the city of Prescott embraces the vision of a healthy, vibrant, strong community for children, youth, families, and peoples of all ages, and celebrates the fact that a majority of people do not abuse drugs and alcohol. And whereas the city of Prescott recognizes that youth prevention is essential based on the fact that 9 out of 10 people who struggle with substance use disorders began using substances as a teenager. And whereas knowing that families are adversely affected by illegal drug use, including work problems, legal problems, mental health problems, physical illness, addiction, accidents, accidental death, economic loss, child abuse, destruction of families, driving while impaired, and crimes against persons and property. And whereas the city of Prescott would like to commend and pay tribute to all of its citizens who choose to be free of illegal drug use. Now, therefore, Phil Good, the mayor of Prescott, does hereby proclaim the week of April 15th through the 20th, 2024, as Stand With Me, Be Drug Free Week, and encourages its citizens to participate in the celebration of a drug-free, healthy community by participating in the planned events, activities, and displays. can come over this way. You can look at the audience.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is Kelly Lee. I am the program manager at MapForce. I'd like to introduce my friends here with me. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is Ivy Chamberlain. I'm the Youth Education Coordinator. And I'd like to introduce the MapForce Yavapai County Youth Council Vice Chair, Toby Chang.
Mayor, council members, and members of the public. My name is Toby Chang. I am a senior at Basis Prescott and the vice chair of the Yavapai County Youth Council. MapForce is the Yavapai County Prevention Coalition. Our main goal is preventing substance misuse before it even starts. Our coalition comprises of many stakeholders, including youth, and over 100 volunteers. We have age-specific prevention education for grades K through 12, including building resiliency, building life skills, and building self-esteem. We educate with facts and build confidence in children to make the best decisions for themselves and their future. We also support our parents and caregivers with free parenting education classes, community trainings, webinars, and resources. Study after study has shown that about 84% of people decide not to use illegal drugs. We're here to celebrate that fact and to celebrate our healthy families and provide support to those who need it most. By working with our partners in schools, in law enforcement, town governments, and our many stakeholders, we can make a difference together. We ask you all to celebrate Stand With Me, Be Drug Free Week, April 15th through 20th, as a way to honor and protect the health of our children. We invite the members of the community to come out to Mortimer Farm on Saturday, April 20th at 10 a.m. for our Walk With Me, Be Drug Free 1 mile walk. Again, it's at Mortimer Farms. This event is free to all families, and there will be activities for the kids, as well as food, drinks, and a scavenger hunt. Thank you for your support, and thank you for ensuring the health of our children and for the general public. Thank you.
Okay, we'll next move on to the open call to the public. City Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. City of Prescott welcomes public engagement. Residents may comment and address the council regarding matters that are not included on the posted agenda during the call to the public. If you wish to speak, please complete a green speaker card and submit it to me prior to the meeting being convened. As a reminder, speakers are limited to 4 minutes, and the call to the public will be limited to 40 minutes in total, with the following stipulations. Citizens will be limited to addressing the council on the same topic only 4 times in total. If a topic has been addressed more than 5 times by different speakers, the mayor may limit future discussion on that topic. And topics of a primarily national concern may be limited at the discretion of the mayor. I do have 6 comment cards today, and the first is from Ralph Hess.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Ralph Hess. I'm a resident of Prescott, have been for 33 years. It's unfortunate that you canceled the study session earlier this afternoon because I think that would have been a great opportunity for a collaboration among you, the council members, city staff, your tenant, Prescott Frontier Days, the Gail Gardner neighborhood, and the public regarding issues regarding the rezoning and master plan that was to be the subject of the study session. And the reason I say that is I know that this matter's not being put off forever. As I read in the Sunday version of the Daily Courier, Kimberly Lopez, who is the president of the Prescott Frontier Days, is quoted as saying that we look forward to revisiting the master plan and process put in place by the council at a future date. And so that's what brings me here for this comment today, because I looked at the documents that are on the city website, a whole list of documents related to the master plan. And in looking at those, I failed to see, it appears to me that the city has failed to initiate the process in accordance with the Land Development Code. Specifically, in looking at the listed item, which is listed as Rodeo Rezone Master Plan Letter of Intent, and I'll quote just one portion of that. It says, Line Engineering and Surveying, LLC, acting as agent on behalf of the City of Prescott, intends to apply for a rezone request for the City of Prescott-owned parcel, and then it lists the parcel number. There's nothing that I've found on that list of documents that is an agency agreement between the City of Prescott and Line Engineering and Surveying. The item on the list of documents that is entitled City of Prescott Agent Authorization Letter doesn't mention agency. It's a one-sentence letter from the former city manager that is not an agency agreement. So the concern that I have is if this process moves forward as it looks like it's going to, and sometime in the future, I urge you to, before it goes any further, to adopt an agency agreement between the City of Prescott, who is the owner of the property, and whomever you're going to have act as the agent for the rezoning process in accordance with the Land Development Code. Thank you.
Earl DeCue.
Good afternoon. My name is Earl Duque, and my wife and I own the property on corner Gail Gardner and Fairgrounds. And I'm here today to introduce some concepts from the Gail Gardner neighborhood. Some people have been hearing the Gail Gardner neighborhood. Who are these people? Well, the Gail Gardner neighborhood has been around for quite a while. And they've been participating in the activities on the fairgrounds, including participating in the rodeo, attending the rodeo, participating in the fair. In fact, myself, I go across the street and show my vegetables at the fair. We've been in the area for a long time. The residents value the historic Prescott traditions that happen there, such as the rodeo and the fair. And in fact, one of my neighbors, they've been living on the same property for over 4 generations, and 3 generations are living on the property now. In fact, the Doherty Park subdivision was established in 1924. We celebrate our 100th year anniversary this year, and we're planning to have a big party. And it's interesting, too, if you think about 1924, that was the first year that the word rodeo was actually used in Arizona. The Gail Gardner neighborhood includes folks from Gail Gardner Way and all the streets that intersect it, the Idlewild neighborhood, Dexter neighborhood, Upper Norris Road, Oregon Avenue, and more. And the neighborhood's been active in quite a while. In 2000, they came to council to file a neighborhood plan that was adopted by the council in 2000, and later on updated in 2003 and adopted again. Last summer, when we found out what was going on at the fairgrounds, we looked at the neighborhood plan to say, hey, what's going on here? What's in here that says that people can come in and do whatever they want to do on the fairgrounds? And we reevaluated it, and we looked at traffic circulation, quality of life, and land use, and documented a draft that we submitted to community planning or community development, and they gave their inputs along with historical inputs, and that was completed, or that draft was completed in January 2024. And may I approach? I have a handout. Now, what I handed out to the council is a site plan that was developed in cooperation with the neighbors and different people who make use of the fairgrounds, including we worked with the county extension, worked with the neighbors. I'm actually on Prescott Farmers Market board and participated in the compost program. And we also looked at the master plan that was put out by the rodeo folks. And we incorporated some of their needs and wants, and everybody's was put into here. So some of the major things to point out is we're asking that no main entrance during big events happen on Gail Gardner Way, which is consistent with our desire to reduce the amount of traffic during big events. We were asking that maybe the events entrance could be more on Miller's Valley side. We also are asking for, should we have more of a public green space, public park, a public gardens and that are managed by the Master Gardeners program, so a demonstration garden. The compost program is still there. And also, one of the things that we're really concerned about is that this whole area, which is currently used by the neighborhood, people are out there walking their dogs and throwing balls and flying airplanes and kites and stuff, that this doesn't just become a big asphalt jungle. So this is one viewpoint of what we can make the fairgrounds into. And one of the main key points that we should come away from about the neighborhood is that we agree that the historic world's oldest rodeo must be preserved and protected. We want to protect the quality of life at the same time of the historic neighborhood and Prescott's west side, and that these two concepts are not mutually exclusive.
Mr. Please conclude your.
Okay, sorry. What we're looking for is to create a viable home for the rodeo, the fair, cooperative extension, Prescott Farmers Market, and preserve our neighborhood, and that we need a collaborative community process that's led by the city to enable that so we all can have a voice on equal footing. Thank you, Mayor.
Sarah Michelle Taylor.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Sarah Michelle Taylor. I'm reading on behalf of Bonnie McMinn, both from Prescott, Arizona. Prescott is steeped in history with more than a few firsts. 1864, we were designated the first territorial capital of Arizona. 1868, Prescott Unified School District was the first official school district in the state. 1888, Prescott became home to the world's oldest rodeo. The Palace is the state's oldest restaurant and bar. Charlotte Hall Museum is home to Fort Misery, the oldest log cabin in Arizona. This isn't a history lesson, however, but rather recognition of our place and importance in what is considered the Wild West. We respect our history and we know what it should look like. Just a few short weeks ago, citizens came into these council chambers to protect our historic Whiskey Row from a new hotel from which didn't fit in with the setting, aesthetically displeasing due to height, mass, and not respecting the history of Whiskey Row. There is historic importance in retaining the mystique of the Wild West, with the likes of Big Nose Kate, Wyatt Earp, and Doc Holliday. Take a stroll down Whiskey Row most weekends, and you'll see the regulators and the shady ladies. We love our history. The same aesthetic measure can and should be applied to the City of Prescott's Fairgrounds property, which happens to be home to the world's oldest rodeo. There is an effort to place a couple of buildings on the historic register and maybe even the rodeo arena. But it's ironic that the battle we are facing with the proposed massive expansion of the rodeo grounds really boils down to citizens who want to preserve the world's oldest rodeo as it is with some comfort improvements and essentially save its historic significance, protect it, celebrate it, pay homage to our past, and keep it an authentic experience for future generations. It's important we maintain the historical requirements of the city's Preservation Commission pertaining to the rodeo's history. Thank you for listening.
Sue Manuel.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. If it's all right, Shell's going to pass out some papers for you that I've highlighted about some interesting stuff. Thank you for letting us speak. My name is Sue Manuel. I live at 508 Fairgrounds, and I'm the neighbor that Earl's talked about. 3 generations in my family are living on my property at this time. Much like the controversy about the iconic Whiskey Row and a hotel that doesn't fit Prescott's iconic rodeo and PFD's on and now postponed master plan and rezoning doesn't fit. They're trying to fit a size 12 footprint into a size 6 area. The boot just doesn't fit. Has PFD dropped their zoning request? If not, why not? The press release that I read doesn't mention them dropping this request. If PFD is truly going to focus on essential repairs and improvements, the change in zoning is not required. And is there an ulterior motive by them? I am very sorry that they didn't want to do the study session today. I think that there is or was much to learn from them and for them to learn from us. SPC zoning is a very questionable fit as it requires housing or residential areas. A mixed-use district might be a better fit with a special use permit. But heck, why not just leave it as it is with a special use permit that has been grandfathered in for the world's oldest rodeo and Yavapai County Fair? It has worked for years, even decades, and it is zoned correctly to fit in with our neighborhood. Haven't we all had our fill of SPC zoning with a debacle with Deepwell Ranch and the airport? I would like to see PFD adhere to their current lease, as they have broken city ordinances on camping and animal and fowl, which puts them in a material breach of their lease per the lease. They have also broken many other sections of the lease, such as Section 5, 8B, and 8D, and others. Maybe a committee or commission needs to be set up to watch over the fairgrounds properly, as current oversight is lacking. Speaking of the lease, in Section 6 of the lease, it states that the city will contemplate soliciting proposals for the master plan. The city will contemplate, not the renter, not the leasee. In Section 10, it states, it is understood and agreed that the city has no present or future duty or responsibility to make alterations or improvement to the premises. The rodeo, the citizens of Prescott, and the neighborhoods of Prescott have gotten along well for the past 134 years or so. It is just in the last 2 or 3 years that the relationship with the rodeo has become stressed and strained. I, for one, do not like being bullied, intimidated, lied to, or information being withheld or being ignored by them. It is hard to maintain a trusting relationship under these circumstances. Remember, this property belongs to the citizens of Prescott, all the citizens of Prescott, not just one organization. Yes to our iconic historic boutique, world's oldest rodeo, no to rezoning, and no to PFD's master plan. Thank you.
Mari Jennifer Chandler.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Thank you for allowing me to comment today. I'm Jen Chandler, and I live on Doherty Street. I'm a longtime resident of Prescott. I've lived in West Prescott 30 years, Gail Gardner neighborhood 20 plus years, and 14 in my current residence, which is in really close proximity to the fairgrounds. I love my historic neighborhood more than I've loved anywhere I've ever called home. I love the open space of the fairgrounds as part of the neighborhood, and my dog and I enjoy visiting the horses every rodeo season. I've been willing to not mind the noise and the disruption caused by the rodeo because it's the world's oldest rodeo and it happens during the 4th of July, and it's central to my neighborhood's history and character for more than 100 years. But today I want to discuss the parking and the traffic related to the events that take place on the city-owned fairgrounds property, and ask the City Council to address the current traffic and parking challenges, as well as the potential challenges in the proposed in the Prescott Frontier Days master plan. Mayor, may I step forward and share with you an image? In this drone image from July 2nd, 2023 at 1:53 p.m., you'll see that the traffic is backed up for blocks on Gail Gardner, Fair, and Fairground Streets, and a full parking lot at the rodeo. All of the main arteries of our neighborhood get heavily congested, which disrupts normal daily life for residents of the neighborhood. In addition, parking from these events often overflow into the residential streets, including Gail Gardner, increasing the congestion, delays, and safety concerns. I've had my own driveway blocked by a parked car during an event last year. All of this indicates to me that the venue is already beyond its current capacity. And now the Prescott Frontier Days is talking about expansion with more and bigger events annually. I noticed in the PFD master plan, they're suggesting a main entrance of the venue off Gail Gardner. This would only further exacerbate the congestion and safety issues. A main entrance on Miller Valley would be more appropriate for the entry for the venue. I urge City Council to not consider a main entrance on Gail Gardner. My neighbors and I would like to see traffic calming and safer pedestrian crosswalks on Gail Gardner. And we would like to see a traffic and parking plan for all events hosted on the property, including requirements for compliance and including how to minimize delays of emergency response vehicles, as well as address additional safety concerns of neighborhood residents. Any increased use of city-owned fairgrounds property will only increase the traffic and the burden to our neighborhood. I hope the City Council will conduct a full traffic and parking review for all of a full traffic and parking review and allow for public input. And I would like to see the City Council establish an advisory council that has representation from the historic Gail Gardner neighborhood. Thank you.
Truly Bracken.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I know that I have flooded y'all with information in the last few days, and that's only a part of the educational effort that I've undertaken with the assistance of the really competent city staff and city managers with whom I've had a very cooperative relationship. I'm very grateful for their knowledge, their longstanding knowledge of this site, and I am not the expert. Those are the people who need to provide you with the detailed information you need going forward. I know at this point that the Prescott Frontier Days has paused its process. That's fine, but there's still going to be a rodeo. There's still going to be animal events coming up. And in light of that, we would urge that the rodeo look closely at its animal waste management practices and consider the impact on the nearby Miller Creek. There's a biobasin, a biological retention basin on site, as I'm sure you have seen in the materials that I provided to you. That biobasin is intended to mitigate, to reduce the pollution from the site that's widely diffused on any rodeo grounds. But there, at least the last time I drove by, which was Monday morning, there was still a manure waste pile upslope from the biobasin. That basin isn't intended to reduce the pollution from a concentrated waste source like that manure pile. Matt Killeen, who's the city's environmental coordinator, was very quick to praise the rodeo for improving its waste management practices. He was very positive about that, which makes it all the more puzzling that that manure pile remained on site. They may have a plan to move it soon. It would be important for that to be communicated to the city if so. I think at this point, I would just note that our discussions have been eye-opening to me, very positive and very helpful. And I would still urge the council at a point that you deem appropriate to do a study session at which you can hear both from Matt Killeen, perhaps his manager, Brian Ruiz, as well as interested organizations in the community who have a focus on watershed issues. There are people who have looked at these issues deeply, and they could share their expertise with you, much greater expertise than I possess. Thank you so much.
That's all, Mayor.
Well, thank you all for your comments. We'll now move into the next section agenda. So we'll start with the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to pull any items from consent?
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to pull item D as in dog and E.
D and E. Very good, Councilmember Roosing. Any additional concerns on the consent agenda? Not seeing any, I'll entertain a motion for items A through C.
Mayor, I move to adopt consent agenda items A through C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Councilman passes 7-0.
Very good. Councilmember Roosing, item 9D.
Thank you. The reason why I pulled this, it's concerning a software agreement with Microsoft in over $600,000 over 3 years. And I was just concerned, it's such a big number. Number one, are there any alternatives to Microsoft? And what would happen if we didn't approve this and instead looked for something a little more cost effective?
So let's start with the first part, which is alternatives. The biggest alternative you find in business is Google, which Google's great, Google's fine. The problem Google creates for government is that their business model essentially...
Could you move closer to the microphone?
Sorry. Their business model is basically about selling your data. That is a major problem with government, especially when it comes to areas like, say, Chief Bonnie's area, where we have to deal with the FBI, Department of Public Safety in Arizona. So while Google's a big player, they're problematic because of their business model. Let's set Google aside for a minute. Set Microsoft Cloud aside for a minute. What if we pulled everything back to on-premise? Practically speaking, that creates a couple of challenges. One of them is financial. If tomorrow you were to say, hey, here's a piggy bank, a sack of money, go buy Microsoft Office and install it on all the city's computers, it's going to be in the order of about $220,000 just to acquire that software. Then we have to go install it. Then we have to do our email, which is going to be another $120,000 probably for the email server software, backups of that, cybersecurity stuff. That's about $350 you're talking right there. And then we have our actual storage of like SharePoint, that kind of stuff, and that's going to be probably another $75,000 to $100,000. So financially, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And I get the value proposition is a little tricky because once you go to a subscription model, they got you, right? Most people aren't going to pull back. The flip side of that, though, is it's really hard to avoid the subscription model. I'll give you a good example. A couple weeks ago, Microsoft came out with a pretty bad security advisory about their email software. If you have that email software here on premise, you're in bad doo-doo. If you're in the cloud, you're good. If you were cynical, you might assume there's a reason why that's the case. Not because Microsoft or any other company necessarily is out of the goodness of their hearts, it's an oversight. They didn't mean to, it's too complicated for them to solve. Everything is kind of tilted to kind of gently pushing organizations along to be a subscription customer. It's not just software. That's a lot of things in our society is subscribe. How much does that cost again? Where's the bill, and why is this end up paying for that? And is it per year? Is it per month? Per week? I totally get it. I take our role as public servants very seriously. I don't love spending money. I don't enjoy spending money. If there was a less expensive way to do this, we would definitely do it. We'd pursue it. It ends up being kind of like the devil that, So I flip it around like, okay, yes, it's a 3-year agreement to Microsoft. Yes, it's a lot of money. What do we get for it? Are we getting value out of that agreement? If we were to give Microsoft or any company a sack of money and they run off and you never see them again, or what they give you is like the equivalent of like a car that's up on blocks in your driveway and you never get to drive it, then what was the point, right? Like, it's a waste of money if we don't get something out of it. And with 365s in particular, I think we get a lot out of it. Now, it's uneven in our city. Some departments have taken off with it. Holger would be a good example, fire, and just run. Other departments are still in kind of like, I'm okay, you're okay. Maybe this will go away, but we got other fish to fry, and I get that. That's not their main focus. So it's a long answer to your question, Councilmember Rusing. However, it's hard to not be in a subscription model for this particular software. Microsoft's got a lot of smart people. Google's got a lot of smart people. They think about this and they make it so that they're on the edge of the pond, throwing in the proverbial fishing lure, waiting for somebody to grab. And you do get value out of it, to be fair. But they also know once you're there, you're kind of there, as long as they don't screw up. Major insecurity, which is something that Microsoft does have an advantage over Google, is Microsoft, because of their ties to the federal government, Department of Defense, et cetera, they have to provide certain assurances, ways of doing things that aren't going to leave us exposed as a government to, hey, your stuff's in there mixed with somebody in a strip mall somewhere. Like, well, gee whiz, that doesn't seem like the same kind of business, right? Department of Defense, county, city, a couple people in a strip mall selling stuff, that's great, but they're just fundamentally different things. Does that help? Does that make sense? Am I explaining it well?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your explanation.
Absolutely.
Any other concerns or comments? Thank you, Nate. I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda item D.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Very good. Councilmember Rusing, item 9E.
Yes, 9E is concerning the hiring of Brown & Brown to represent the city in this ongoing Gila River adjudication. And this is all about our water rights. And this is one of the most, this adjudication has been going on for 48 years, and it's one of the most complex lawsuits in U.S. history. And the taxpayers need to realize that there's many other players that are part of this adjudication, and they have giant war chests and endless funds. We don't. And I just want to make sure that we're not signing something that's going to be open-ended. And I haven't seen the contract. It wasn't provided to us. And I'm just concerned that are we going to be writing a blank check? Are we going to get something in return of value? And are we going to get a report as to how much we're being charged? I would just like to have counsel give us some answers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, as you mentioned, the Gila River adjudication has been going on for decades. It obviously deals with the Gila River and all of its tributaries and all contributing water sources. So it adjudicates the rights of everyone that claims water rights related to that. And it can impact us in a lot of ways. Essentially, we start at where we're at, and we can only go down from there. So we have a few immediate issues in the adjudication that could affect our rights, primarily two being a trial scheduled for August to adjudicate whether areas within the Big Chino areas are going to be determined to be part of the subflow zones of the Verde River and then the Gila River. And another issue that's kind of immediate is a settlement agreement that is proposed by the Yavapai Apache. And we don't know, quite frankly, much about it. It's been going on negotiation-wise for a decade or so, but every party has been subject to an NDA. And we just last week received word that they wanted our opinion as to the agreement. And so getting to determine how that relates to us and the upcoming trial in August is very important. We've been represented in the past by several firms, but our most recent counsel left the state, moved, and we've been handling in-house and looking for someone who had the expertise that we could trust, who could do it. And we found it in Brown & Brown, who's been doing this for about as long as the adjudication. As to the particulars of the agreement, it is open-ended in the sense that we can terminate with 30 days notice. They stop work and bill us for anything they've done up to that point. We'll have monthly billings, and whether to report to council is up to you. I can certainly send a quarterly update on fees to council to let you determine whether we need to move a different direction.
Okay, thank you. I think that was one of my main concerns when you're involved in a lawsuit that has no end, that you want to make sure that you're just not writing a blank check. Thank you.
Well, I will say that under our previous representation, I did get monthly invoices that I reviewed regularly, make sure that the billable hours had some legitimacy to them. And as I discussed today with our Brown & Brown potential new attorneys, originally there were about 70,000 litigants, almost 50 years ago. So I said, how many of those litigants have had their cases settled? They said, well, there's a number of them. I said, what's that number? 4. So this will be going on for quite a long time, and being able to find legitimate, skilled, experienced water lawyer specialists is a very difficult thing within this state. So the fact that we have retained Brown & Brown, and Attorney Young here has had experience working with them before, I think we're going to be relatively well served. But I'm telling you, it's billable hours, and these are expensive. But in order for us to be able to guarantee and protect our water rights now and in the future, we have to have competent representation. And I think Brown & Brown fills that bill. Any further discussions? I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Mayor, I move to consent to representation by Brown & Brown Law Offices, PC, in the Gila River adjudication.
Second.
A motion is second. Please vote.
I'm a yes, Sarah.
Thank you. Passes 7-0.
Very well. We'll move to item 10A.
Public hearing and consideration for a new Series 10 beer and wine store liquor license application from Akansha Ashwin Chowdhury, applicant for Arco AMPM Prescott, location 286 Walker Road. The application fees have been paid and the signs have been posted for the required 20 days. Staff has received the application and determined that it is in compliance, and no public comments have been received.
So is this a change in ownership or a change in management at that Arco AMPM?
It's being taken over by a licensing agent, which is very common for a lot of our businesses, so that the owners themselves don't have to handle the liquor licensing portion.
Yeah, I know. I visit that Arco relatively frequently. Very good. I'll entertain a motion on these items.
Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Sarah, mine's not coming up. I'm sorry, but I'm a yes.
Passes 7-0.
Mayor, I move to approve liquor license number 272696 for a new Series 10 beer and wine store liquor license application for Arco AMPM Prescott, location 286 Walker Road.
Second.
Motion is second, and I forgot to ask if we had any public comment.
We do not, Mayor.
Okay, then I'm covered. Okay. Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Great. That concludes that item. We'll move to item 11A, regular agenda.
Adoption of resolution number 2024-1880, calling for a special election to be held on November 5th, 2024, regarding a transaction privilege tax for public safety improvements.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll begin this discussion, kick it off a little bit here. As you know, before you is the potential adoption of a resolution to call for a special election on November 5th. We have received feedback from the council from previous study sessions to prepare a little bit more information. So while Mr. Woodfill, our finance director, has some slides prepared on projected capital costs for public safety, operating costs, and thresholds of sales tax that would meet those, you're not being asked to make a vote on that outcome today. So just so the public's clear on that as well. I will say that we spent a lot of time over the last week putting this together. Mark has a lot of good information. If we could get through about the first 8 or 10 slides, we think it'll answer most of the questions, but we're happy to answer as many as we can as we get to that point. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I just want the public to know that this is a procedural vote. This just allows us to make the requirement to call a special election. Next month, we'll be reviewing the details of the ballot language. So we have a month to kind of figure out exactly how much, when, how it's going to be applied, whether we split it into a operational ongoing tax period, and then another section of it that will apply to the capital requirements. So this is purely procedural. But having your presentation will certainly bring up some of the things we're going to have to be considering between now and next month.
Thank you, Mayor. As Tyler mentioned, we worked with Public Safety, and they put together the list of capital and the projected operating. And again, this looks a little different than what we looked at about a week ago. We took some of the capital off as it may be able to be grant funded and a few other things, so that we're going out for a tax vote for things that we need, things that there aren't really other funding options. So with that, we have Chief Holger and Chief Bonnie here to answer any questions on the details of the capital, if there are any, and we can kind of go through all the slides if you want and then come back and look in more detail. We also did the operations and kind of summarized it by various service areas with police and fire. Significant operating needs, obviously, to fund the capital facilities that are projected. And again, looking, just went back one slide, the capital is up front because public safety, as they mentioned, considers the shortfalls that exist today, and we need to get caught up. So the capital is significant over the first 5 years. And then again, we have another fire station out around year 8. That works well with the tax because you first build the facility and then you have the operations. As we look at the operations here, operating impact is very much towards the end of the time range presented. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the operating impact gets more significant as we staff fire stations, as we get police, new additional police on staff. So my job as part of this was to look at revenues in a couple different scenarios that we kind of touched on last week in more detail, more specific detail, and to also address some concerns that came up last week at the study session. So this first sheet is looking at a capital and operating tax together in one tax. that offers a lot of advantages. As I mentioned, the capital is up front, operating increases over time. So in the early years, you have additional cash, so you can cash fund more capital, issue less debt, reduce the overall cash. By the time the capital is created, you have debt service, of course, but you have some of those revenues are now available for operations. Now on this sheet, the first section of the sources section is operating type revenues, general fund contributions, the proposed tax at 0.75, and interest earnings on any balance that this would create. And then again, we draw a subtotal there. Now there's specific capital funding things, development impact fees. We talked last week. Last week we presented a projection of our current development impact fees. Based on input, we looked at what the rate studies that we're in right now, what the proposed development impact fees would be if council were to adopt those. So you'd notice these fees are significantly higher than they were last week. And also we show the use of the reserves as we start to build these facilities, mainly in the first year. So that gives us the capital funding for our total sources. Now we have our operating costs here. And again, those are partially funded by the general fund. General fund will always be the most significant part of the funding for the public safety. The additional tax is to help to achieve the level that council has expressed a desire to achieve. And then we have cash funding capital. If cash is available, we're going to fund it with cash so that we don't have the debt service interest out there. And then we, of course, will need to do capital funding just because if you're building millions of dollars, $110 million capital plan, primarily in the first 5 years, you have to issue debt to do that. So with that, as you get to the bottom of the sheet, you see a cash flow of each year and then a continued balance as you move forward. A couple things just to point out, and again, we can come back and do questions, but if you look at the 10th year on this sheet, you'll notice that the operating revenue that is shown is $56 million from the general fund and from the dedicated tax as well as interest earnings. You'll notice that operating revenue or operating expenses is just under 56 million. So the tax after the facilities are built, the 0.75 is sufficient at the 10-year projection level. And again, these are all projections. There are assumptions on assumptions and so on. So the reality of where we are in 10 years depend on a lot of things. Economic activity, they depend on the state legislature not taking away our tax base by not allowing us to tax food or other things. But the 0.75 is basically the minimum, looking at these reasonable assumptions, I believe, that I used to fund the operating costs brought forward by public safety. 0.75 is needed as we get out in the years, but it also takes care of the capital in the short term. Also on this sheet at the bottom, you'll notice I put the amount of debt we'll have to actually issue. $110 million worth of capital facilities, we'll have to issue $72.5 million with this scenario, and that has a maturity in 2058. So there's that. We had to go to 30-year loans. We looked at a 0.8 based on some comments by council. Obviously, that provides a little more funding. We can issue a little less debt, a little less interest costs, and we'll have a little better cushion out of that 10-year projected, again, it's projected level. We have a little more cushion between operating revenues and the projected operating expenses. So that gives you some latitude because, again, not only are we projecting revenues, but we're projecting what our staffing needs are really going to be in 10 years. Who knows what'll happen? Pandemics, other world type things that could impact our community. Another area that we looked at based on council comments is to have a separated tax, a portion for capital and a portion for operating. To do that, I tried to keep the 0.75 just for a discussion point to kind of start. So looking at that, a 0.19% tax rate for capital is doable over the period using the 30-year debt. Obviously, you can see we issue almost $94.2 million in debt out over a longer period, so final maturity is 2062. I know I'll be at the city still, but a lot of you will probably have decided not to run again. That would cover the capital portion if that portion were needed to be retired. Now, to do that, obviously trying to keep it at the 0.75, I get a 0.56 for operations, which is problematic as we look at the projections here. And again, all other projections across these scenarios are staying the same. But as you can see, operations, as you build another fire station and you do additional police officers, we no longer have enough revenue to meet those operating costs. In the 8th year, the Station 77 staffing comes on, and that pushes us into a negative. As you can see, 1.4 negative in that year. And then again, it starts to compound and expand. Obviously, we've accumulated cash because we didn't have those capital expenditures in the first few years because this is an operating fund. But with the compounding effect that we're seeing in year 8 through 10, it's probably only 2 more years. By year 12, that balance will be gone and we'll be in a deficit and unable to maintain that level of staffing at the 0.56. As I mentioned, 0.75 is really the minimum you're going to be able to have out there at the 8 to 10 year period and maintain the operations. Now, if we wanted to have a separated tax, we could run the numbers for a 0.9 capital and a 0.75 operating with use of early year surpluses in the operating fund going to help fund capital. And then at year 8 through 10, the 0.75 is available for operations, and then the 0.9 can go away when the debt is retired. I've done preliminary numbers on something like that, and that would require the debt to be retired within 10 years, 10 or 11 years. A lot nicer number than 2062. So I don't have those sheets today. If that's something the council's interested in pursuing, I can definitely put those sheets together. That would be a 9.29% tax. I think I did that right. And then when the capital goes off, it'd be a 9.1. So what does that mean? Here I have the 0.75 and the 0.8, which is what the sheets we put together for today were for. As you can see, the bottom number with the 0.75, the 9.1 is what we would be once the capital tax retires under the scenario I just described. Obviously, when it's on there, we would be at a, don't tell me, 9.29 for that 10-year period that we're dealing with the capital. So that would be slightly higher than Prescott Valley's, definitely lower than Chino's. It'd be 0.11 higher than Prescott Valley. So that's approximately 11 cents on $100 worth of groceries. It's a very small differential between the two, but it is higher.
Councilman Montoya, you had a question.
I don't, Mark, you had alluded to the idea that you wanted to get us through your presentation, so I don't know if you have more to cover. Or...
I just have 2 more slides. I
can wait.
I have a slide in there we can refer to with questions that has several different tax rates on it. Glad to bring that up for discussion. And of course, we have the calendar for the elections, when the actions have to happen. And of course, Sarah, our city clerk, is here.
Mark, Councilmember Rusing had a question.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to make the point that since you brought up Prescott Valley, their tax rate does not include funding for a fire department. They don't even have a fire department. They depend on CAFMA, which is a property tax funded entity for everyone that's not in the Prescott city limits. has to pay an extra, I believe it's almost $1,000 a year for their fire. But Prescott Valley does not have a fire department. And under the mutual aid and assist agreement, you'll notice that this latest fire they had, the Legato fire, our wonderful fire department was over there helping out Prescott Valley. Thank you.
Please continue, Mr. Woodford.
Be glad to open up for questions. I made it through the slides. Again, we do have the election dates here for discussion, and Clerk Sipes has more information on the election. If there are questions about costs or procedure, if the election were to fail, if we picked a date, or any of that kind of stuff. So with that, any other questions?
Yeah, I think looking from for the public to look at these effective dates, whether it's calling the election, the ballot language being approved, and then passing it, and when the tax rates would be effective, you can see that it's almost a year out from the time that we make a decision between today and a month from now. And by delaying it, it delays pretty significantly. That second option in May pushes it all out another 6 months before it becomes effective. And if we're dealing with a declining ability to respond promptly to 911 calls, I'm telling you, over 11 minutes before a first responder shows up at a residence where you probably have an emergency medical condition, that's just too darn long. And I certainly wouldn't want to be waiting that long if I were in a serious medical emergency. Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, I was curious about the debt issuance that you were showing. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding that part of the presentation correctly. So if you can indulge me.
Sure.
If I'm understanding you correctly, if we, there was the notion of doing the 0.75 and having that, I know you teased out the idea of capital and operational costs, but the debt issuance, actually, if we were to kind of run it as two separate revenue streams for capital and ongoing or operational costs, the debt issuance goes out further and costs us more. Is that correct? Or am I missing something there?
No, you're correct. Obviously, as debt issues go longer, you pay more interest. On this scenario with the 0.75 combined tax rate, it would go out to 2058. We'd pay an extra $61 million in interest for a total of $133 million to finance at $72 million. And if it was the 1.9 and we had to issue $94 million, we would pay an additional $79 million and go out to 2062.
So just so I can understand the accounting component of it, it would seem that we're getting the virtue of using those, what will eventually become those operating costs to front load the capital costs. Is that right? That essentially saves us money and time in the debt issuance?
Correct.
Okay. And it's weird because it feels counterintuitive because you're dealing with a low rate, but now it makes a little bit more sense to me. And I guess the other question I had is when you showed this 0.75, and I think it's here when we're looking at the 10-year fiscal projection, what I find curious is that, the revenue sources we're getting outside of paying down the debt service, to your point, we're pretty even 10 years. And I understand that 10 years out is quite a while and a lot can happen, significant recession, pandemic, whatever. The cost of employment is going to certainly escalate between now and then. But it's good to me to kind of know that, and I think this is something for the general public as we consider this to be aware of. It's not as if we are going to be providing our police and fire with like gold-plated trucks and vehicles to drive around. We're really just coming down to what the limit of what we actually need to bring, as the mayor pointed out, take it from an almost 11-minute response time to go back to, now 2 weeks ago, we had fire do the presentation where they said, we're targeting a 5-minute response time, which, I think everyone in here probably wants our response times to be at that level. So I think it's interesting to see that, and it seems pretty clear to me that we're not doing a very big ask at this point. Thank you for that clarity.
Sure. Just real quick on the mayor's point, I guess, on the dates of the election. The tax effective date is significantly after the election based on the Department of Revenue requirements. But if a tax is adopted, we can start moving on those facilities immediately, even if the tax doesn't come into play for 6 months. We can start getting RFPs out on the street to get the buildings ready to go and all that. We can issue debts to get this project going because we have that dedicated revenue source coming.
Councilman Gambogi.
Mark, in a number of your alternatives at the lower left, you had you had projected debt and
final maturity.
Final maturity. Could you just go through the scenarios where I could just focus on the lower left? So that's 0.9 tax. That's $94 million, and you pay it off in 2082.
62.
62. Back out the other one. And so for 0.75 tax, it's $72 million paid off in 2058.
Yes.
And the other one is what, 0.8?
0.8, it's less money, but it pays off the same year.
So it's about $20 million difference between 0.75 and 0.8.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rusing.
Thank you. I'd just like to emphasize to the public that our 8.35% sales tax does not stay here in the community to be invested in the community. Actually, 5.6% of that money goes straight down to Phoenix for the state of Arizona. 0.75% of that money goes straight over to the county for their operations. So that only leaves us with 2% to invest in our community, and 1% is dedicated to roads. That was a voter initiative. So we actually only get to keep 1% that goes to the general fund for the operations of everything else we do in this city. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Cantelmi.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, we're still talking about the numbers, and I did see your graph earlier. If we were to collect 1%, which obviously it would pay back quicker. I don't think you have it up here, do you? Yeah, there it is. So that would be at the high end.
Right. And the scenario that I briefly touched on that I don't have projections formally made for 0.19 capital to retire once the debt is retired, and then the 0.75 for operations would be a 0.94. So many numbers in my head, it's hard to keep them straight, but 0.94, so it'd be less than 1%. I didn't put that on this chart, so I wanted to just point that out. I should have, but it came up late.
Well, if we were to consider a 1%, how much of that would you retire? Would that just be based on the capital needs that we're projecting now? Or would that be up for discussion as we move forward, because we know the price of everything is going up? How are you going to determine that? Do we need to determine that? If we were to take like the 0.75, do we need to determine ahead of time how much of that or when we're going to sunset?
I would defer to legal, but no, you don't have to determine. But the point of determining a sunset, I think, is to make the ballot proposition more popular. Council can always reduce taxes on their decision, but obviously there's no requirement.
Well, as you had mentioned earlier, much of those graphs, in fact, all of it, are just assumptions. We're just projecting
Absolutely.
based on what we know today.
You are
Things
correct.
change. So how could we, if we decide to sunset a portion of this, well, I guess first of all, I should ask, do we have to determine that now?
Right today? No.
Well, no, not today, but when we decide on this, whenever, week or two.
When the ballot language is adopted,
Yeah.
you have to decide that, yes, because
So
it's
you have to
included in the
decide an
ballot
amount.
language.
Oh, that we have to declare. Here's my worry. If we look out 8 years, with the cost of goods and services today, it's very difficult to project, when we're going to meet our capital needs and how much it's going to cost going 10 years out. I would prefer to leave it a little bit open-ended so that we can make sure we get our costs covered. I'm great with sunsetting, and I want to sunset it, but I want to make sure that we sunset it at the appropriate time. So I guess my question is, how do we do that?
You could do that by having a triggering event or a specific date. So either one can be done. But if you're going to have a sunset that's effective, you really have to have the triggering event that sunsets it. Whether it's the event, these buildings are built and paid for, or whether it's a date specific. Either way, but you have to have that in there to make an effective sunset.
I like the first one best, when we've actually accomplished our goal. All right, thank you.
And I should say that having a specific, when we accomplish our goal, does expand the ballot language somewhat, meaning we'd have to state what our goal is and to be able to sunset that portion. So it does complicate it somewhat, but it can be done as part of the ballot language.
Well, we're going to base all that on the data that the chief provided for us, I'm assuming. I mean, I think by all of the studies I've seen from both Chief Bonney and Chief Dura, we need 3 stations, not 5, but 3. So that's going to be our goal, correct?
That is the projection, that we need to relocate a station and build 2 new stations in 10 years.
Right.
As far as the police go, and then property and evidence, further traffic enforcement patrol space for PD and the accompanying officers and sergeants that go with that.
Right.
And so you would have to outline those goals, but to the point of if the milestone is reaching a goal to that point and showing based on the projections, that would likely mean a sunsetting of a portion of a tax in 30 years when the final maturity comes from what you've borrowed. So those are some factors that are in play. Now, Mark has spoken to an option that's not currently up on the screen. We were kind of just throwing this around late last night, so we didn't have a lot of time to put this scenario together. But if you had a higher tax at 0.94, with 0.19 of that being dedicated to capital, at least theoretically, what we've quickly drawn up, it looks like you could sunset that portion in 10 years. But again, you'd have a higher tax.
But we also have a lower debt service.
That is true.
Absolutely.
And
And
that's a
again,
lot.
yeah, initial projections, so the debt would be issued around $41 million for the same capital plan. With a 10-year maturity, the interest would be just under $10 million, and it would sunset in 2035, December.
So just for clarity, if we did that, our debt service would be in the 40 million, not the 70, was it 74 million?
Well, it varied from 94 down to, to 57.
So finding that, sweet spot, I guess we have to figure that out because, look at that. That's a big debt service right there.
Yeah, and that's the lowest one with these projections. And again, the other projection is a higher tax rate. I didn't know if council was interested in that. Like Tyler said, we were just kind of kicking around ideas to get a quicker sunset, have less debt issued last night, and that's what we came up with.
Well, I think we can all agree none of us want a tax, but I think we can also agree we haven't built a fire station in 30 years. With 199% increase in calls, the houses are coming. We've got, I think I just did in fact I did, ComDev supplied to me the amount of single family homes that are in various stages right now at 1,240, I believe it was. We have 1,800 and something apartment units coming up. So we're growing, we're going to grow. I say we get a grip on this now. But the debt service to me is a big part of this. if we can go down to 40 from 74 by collecting a little bit more on the tax now, in the long run, it does save us a significant amount of money. Just a consideration.
And it allows you to sunset within a much
Earlier.
shorter time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could, may I ask, as far as direction that we're seeking, of course, you don't have to decide this today, but it would really help staff if we heard at least a consensus from council whether or not a portion should be sunsetted or not. That would help us bring some projections together. You don't have to make the decision today, but as we have about a month to bring more information to you, we'll be talking several more times with you, but it would help us to have some level of direction on what scenarios we're running.
Well, I can speak for myself by saying if we don't have a sunset component to the capital, I'm not going to support this. I can tell you, I'll take unemployment benefits as an example. People get, 26 weeks or 28 weeks of unemployment. They don't even start looking for work until the week before it expires. So with a sunset clause, and we can include a projected dollar amount, we could even take that dollar amount and apply CPI to it, so you can be covered by potentially escalating costs, and have a date specific on there, so that the police and fire departments, if they're still here 65 years from now, will know that they have to perform and get this work done within that period of time, otherwise it goes away. And I think that's the kind of incentive we can expect to be able to have projects of this magnitude, well-designed, bid out, constructed, etc., and having those keys turned and the doors open, and getting the coverage that we expect to be able to get out of them. So I would say that we have to have a sunsetted capital component to this, and then we can decide how to split up the two different taxes, because ongoing operations are going to be ongoing. And we have to make sure that when we open up those fire stations, we have the engines, the equipment, and the staff to be able to proceed immediately and bring these response times down. Councilman Gambogi, are you up next?
Mark,
I'll get you next.
there's a figure that says how much of our sales tax is paid by people outside the city of Prescott. You know that number?
We've projected it at various numbers over the years. It's generally between 60 and 65%. And again, not tourists, but as people outside the corporate boundaries of the city, in the county and the other cities.
A lot of that would be people in Chino or Prescott Valley or Dewey, right?
Or in the county, yes.
Maybe because we have a lower sales tax in those other communities?
It's more about the location of the city and the regional road system, as well as the fact that we're still an employment center, so people shop, where they are. So they're here for work, they shop on their way home.
This goes back, I think, to Councilman Montoya's question on the 0.75. It kind of front loads the capital, and then as the operation expense picks up, it carries the operation expense. When people are talking about sunsetting, what time frame are we talking about sunsetting the capital expense?
And again, it depends on what level of tax council's wanting to bring. At a 0.75, I don't feel you can sunset it and cover the operations. If you want to sunset it, we need to have a higher tax than that so that we can get the capital done, get the capital paid for, and end up with the 0.75 operating. Does that answer your question?
Superbly well.
Okay.
Councilmember Rusing.
The ballot language is going to be very critical, and we owe it to the taxpayers to be very precise and crystal clear that this money is going to go for public safety. I don't want to see any loophole language like the word may. or anything left that will allow it to be left up to future councils for the money to be used for other purposes, because that's what happened to us in the past, and we have to make sure that we don't make that same mistake again. Thank you.
Well, I'm reminded of Councilmember Montoya's comments when he was saying his father always said a tax never ever goes away, even though people claim it will be. But we delivered on that 0.75 for 443. There were a lot of skeptics, said it's not going to happen, and we achieved our numbers 50% faster than the original projection. And when we got to 1.5 million as the triggering point, that tax went away. So I think if we propose something similar to that, we've got a community that will realize that we can craft it in a similar way and make sure that the tax sunsets and expires when we reach those levels. Speaking of that, Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. My father-in-law appreciates the shout out, so he always holds my feet to the fire. So I appreciate him for that. Tyler, to the question that you kind of put up for direction from council, I would really love to see a sunset option, because I do think we saw with 443 that it was hugely popular, that we were able to, as the mayor pointed out, deliver on that promise of retiring it when we said we would, which was either 10 years or sooner, and we were able to do it in 50% of the time. So I think that's part of me really likes the idea of that. On the other hand, my concern that I have is that I, as a fiscal conservative, like to keep the idea of sales tax as low as possible. I'm also sensitive to the fact that sales tax is the most regressive form of taxation that you can participate in a community, which is to say that it penalizes people who can afford it the least. Which, there's a lot of affluent folks in this community, so I think sales tax generally is not, really keeping anyone down, and ours is not higher than Prescott Valley. But I guess my concern would be that I worry that there might be the perception that if we raise it higher so that we can front load and pay down those capital costs, so that we can kind of say, yay, we sunsetted it, when we could just kind of short change to just say, we're going to do 0.75. If there's the capacity to sunset this in the future, let's review that. But the other thing I'm thinking of is that we're buying 2 to 3 new fire stations, and we're buying them 30 years out, right? Like they will be paid off in 30 years. I don't know for sure, but I would take a bet, my city paycheck against anyone else's up here city's paycheck, which is a lot of money, that in 30 years' time, those facilities will need some sort of capital improvement and maintenance. Now, we could say that that is a problem for a council in the future to deal with, and that's a reasonable response. I think it's one that we need to have a conversation about, though. The other thing that I would say, I would like to see this ballot language have, before we send it to the voters, if we do decide today to move forward with that option, I would like to see options between a sunset and not a sunset, and what that looks like. And I think we need to ask ourselves, if we do 0.75 and that's just 0.75, we're still lower than Prescott Valley, we're still lower than Chino Valley. That's still, we provide a whole host of services that those communities don't even touch, including fire department, but also a municipal golf course that is well patronized by the community members, and a airport that is well patronized by the entire region and is an economic driver beyond our borders. So I think in that context, I want to see options, and I want to see I want to see these numbers fleshed out. Not that they're not fleshed out now, but I'd like to know what the debt service looks like, what are all the triggers, and what does it do? And if we can avoid, because I want to keep taxes low, whatever method gets us to keeping the taxes as low as possible is interesting to me to pursue.
Let's not forget our great solid waste division.
True. Yeah. Excellent point, Mayor.
Councilwoman Furworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I too would like to see these. You were talking as high as 1% with sunsetting numbers below that. I would love to see those scenarios and how they play out the range, and I'd love to see them 2 weeks from now, because I really do think it's, before we finalize the language, if we could engage the public and hear from the public, have the meeting in 2 weeks be well attended by the public, to see where the sentiment is. I will say, at least so far in, the little bit of knowledge that's out there and the discussions that are happening, is that there is a big support for sunsetting some portion. And it drives that level of accountability for government, just like every single consumer is driving in their own homes today. So I too am at this moment very bullish on sunsetting a portion. I understand it's not going to be, given the 30 years we're making up in investments in our public safety, it's not going to be the kind of numbers that the public, got used to with 443. But I think it does hold our feet to the fire as leaders, and recognizes. I honestly, at the 1%, makes me blush. That one just seems like at the far high side for me, honestly, considering what's going on right now with a lot of consumers and income levels and stuff. So I do worry about that one. But 0.75 consistently, forever, and not retiring anything. I understand the math, and I understand, but it just doesn't seem like government's holding our feet to the fire to eliminate costs. So that's where I'm coming out.
Councilman Gambogi.
This may be a question for Holger, and I don't need to know exact, but you were talking about hiring how many firemen? And how many police were 13, 16?
For Station 76, the new station, that would be 15 firefighters, which includes the coverage positions that we would need. And I believe for Chief Bonney, it was 16 officers in total. Yes.
And how do you spread them over this 10-year period?
So over the 10-year period, I need to also qualify that Station 77 in the out years would require an additional 15 firefighters. But before we get there, so I want to emphasize a couple of things. First of all, the efficiency that we're trying to push with these initiatives. We could have asked for 2 new stations now with 2 new engine companies. And as I mentioned across the meetings that we've had, including in our one-on-ones, I feel that it's more responsible to relocate Station 73, where we already have the existing firefighters, and simply relocating them to a more efficient location for us to be able to achieve the same impact on the community with less impact on the taxpayer. So in total, when we're talking about the fire stations that you see here in the projected operating needs, initially it is for that new station, 76. That would be 15 firefighters. And then in the out years, starting in the 8th fiscal year that you see represented there, it's an additional 15 firefighters for that new station down the road. But again, one of the reasons why we're not asking for that station right now is because we want to know what happens to development patterns, and that we make it a responsible investment decision at that time. And making that investment decision right now, in my opinion, would not be the most responsible way to go about investing in these public safety outcomes.
When you priced in the firefighters for the first station, what annual salary or what annual salary plus benefits did you price it in at?
So currently, the starting salary for a firefighter is around $54,000 a year. If you look at the benefit costs, I believe that's around 30 to 35% above the salary for those projections. Now, keep in mind that it's not just firefighters. Each one of those engine companies would have 3 captains and 3 engineers that have somewhat of a higher income, but
so roughly
around
70.
Correct.
All right. So where the next fire station came in at year what?
The next fire station, are we talking about Station 76 or Station 77?
I can't remember the number.
77, the out year, is at the 8th fiscal year.
And what did you price them in at?
That is basically current price plus 3% annual compounding escalation in personnel costs, and a 5% compounding annual escalation in capital costs.
See, when I hear about sunsetting, and, sunsetting worked well for PSPRS, Proposition 443 because it was a lump sum. We paid it down and then we're on. But I think we're underestimating the operational expenses in the out years here because based on a little bit of research I've done, I know that Police Chief Amy Bonney is probably new hires are 20 grand under what they pay at Denver or Houston. And not only is there a shortage of fire and police here in Prescott, but there's a shortage of fire and police all across America. So I think the wages and benefits in the out years are going to increase significantly. So I don't know when we could retire that expense. It's a noble goal, but I don't know that it's realistic.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, I'm not going to try to complicate this, but I am trying to make it where it's palatable for the public. So can we go back to the, I've got it on here too, the 0.75 capital and operations, and then look down here again. I'm going to focus on this projected debt issuance there, $72,528,000. Now go to the 0.80. It's $57,528,000 for projected debt issues. That's a $15 million difference. So based on trying to save that $15 million, that's a station. That's basically a station we're paying just to service this debt. Is it possible, and Joe, I guess I'm going to ask you this too, what about, and I'm just going to throw this out there again, trying to be creative here. What if we started out for the first 3 years at 0.80? Can we have a reduction back, or not back, but down 2.75 after 3 years? And then, again, a sunset clause at the end of the period in which we've paid for those stations that we need. It sounds complicated, but if we can escalate things down as we pay debt and save some of that, $15 million is worth saving.
And I'm sorry, Joe, I just wanted to touch on the fact that you still need 0.75 to hit operations as they're projected. And I agree with Councilman Gambogi. We used 3%. You could have used 5. You could have used 7%. I think 0.75 is the bare minimum to maintain these operating amounts through the 10-year projection period. Obviously, I'd be more comfortable with higher, but I'm sensitive to tax implications of raising things. So, I don't know how you sunset anything if you set it at 0.75. If you want something to retire or terminate, you're going to need to set it a little higher than that for a period of time.
Would it be possible for you to bring us a couple of scenarios like that?
Sure.
Okay.
Be glad to.
Thank you.
All right, can we take public comment now?
Sherry Hanna.
You already had your turn.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for, my name's Sherry Hanna, longtime resident of Prescott. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. So after the study session on March 26, where it became evident to everybody that we needed to move forward with some type of tax revenue to support our police and fire, I went out and started talking to individuals and business owners. Most of you know that I am one of the former co-chairs of the Stanford Prescott Yes on 443. And so I approached business owners that supported the 443. I went to certain individuals, and I can say, and Linda Nichols is here with me, she was secretary of Stanford Prescott Yes on 443. So I know she will concur with my saying that what I heard back from the individuals I spoke with, they are very supportive of our police and fire. And overwhelmingly, they said they would support some type of tax increase to support them. One thing I started asking and got comments from people was, okay, what would you like to see in the actual wording. And I want to reiterate what Councilwoman Rusing said, is that the wording will be critical, as it was on 443. Was critical to the proposition. And we gained the trust of the voters because we did what we said we were going to do. And we don't want to ever do away with that, the trust of the voters. So this is what came up. The police and fire would submit their annual budgets as usual. The proposed tax revenue would not be used as a substitute to lessen the requests for their annual budgets. The proposed tax revenue would be placed in a separate fund to be designated only for police and fire. I think that was brought up before, that we don't want this going, everybody does not, that I spoke with, does not want to have anybody to have an opportunity to pull those tax revenues for something else. We want it only for police and fire. So those funds could not be diverted for by any other council or any other cause at all. It's been suggested that the portion of the capital portion of the proposed tax would sunset. And then operations would, the tax of the operations would go on. So in mentioning that to people, the one thing they said was, well, we don't want to be brought up again. So this will be our one shot that we have to go to the public. So in order to ensure that operations is funded for police and fire, they wanted to see a portion or that tax go into perpetuity. That means that portion for operations would never expire. Now, if we have to build the capital portion of the tax, if we have to build another fire station down the road, then that will be something that that time the current council and the public will then decide. That's what they will decide. But for operations, they wanted to see that tax, portion of the tax, whatever, go on forever. So they would be funded. So we wouldn't have to go back to the public and say, we need more money. So we need to get that right on the percentage, whatever it is that we're going to go to the public and ask them to vote for that. And also was mentioned for operations, how would that be divided up between police and fire? Would it be an even split, or would police get more and fire get less, police get more? So and just consider that. That would be put in the wording, some of that, so the people would know how the operations would be diverted and then funded. That the police and fire chief would do an annual efficiency report to the public to show how the tax money was spent, and so that the public would know that their money was being utilized like it was intended to do. And then the last thing I think, and the most important thing, was people wanted to see that Chief Bonnie and Chief DeRay, along with Mark Woodfield, were totally included in whatever wording and portion of the tax, so that they are the professionals. They live it 24/7. They know what they need. And obviously, we don't, that crystal ball in Mayor Good's office doesn't work. So we can't see down the future. But we can give just on unanticipated, because they are the professionals. They know, they deal with this. They live it. So take at what they suggest, not what everybody else wants to do. They have to be the ones that have the input. So I think also because of the time frame, if it's voted on and does pass, because it'll take time to initiate everything, possibly sooner than better, because it will take more time. And so I think those were the main points that were brought up. So I just wanted to reiterate, to let you know on that. So thank you for your time.
Ralph Hess.
Again, hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Ralph Hess, Prescott. The question I have is, if Council passes resolution number 2024-1880, would the calling for a special election be limited to the proposition for the transaction privilege tax, or could an additional proposition be added to the special election?
It would be limited to that effect. And I'll say that, quite frankly, the transaction privilege tax is the only real option that you'll be looking at in the short term. If there was some sort of bond or something, that would be separate, but this will be limited this call to election would be limited to a transaction privilege tax that would focus on public safety. That would be the parameters of this resolution.
Okay, so, well then, let me ask this question. If the current language of the proposition that you're considering, or the resolution that you're considering today was amended, could there be an additional city proposition, for instance, to add a proposed charter amendment to the special election? Could that be done?
I don't think council could talk about a proposed charter amendment here today because we haven't agendized it, which means I don't think they could amend the resolution. I think in theory, if it was together, then yes, but as a practical matter, they couldn't do it.
And they couldn't amend?
They couldn't do it today.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Tony Hamer.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Seems like we're running into that most powerful force in the world. Compound interest. Isn't that what Uncle Albert said? You know, we've got it right in front of us at this point in time. Thank you, Uncle Albert. I listened with great interest today and had talked with a number of people previously about increased taxes. Over a year ago, I addressed the subject of increased taxes. They're on the way, and here they are. I think the project analysis which has been done, and I call this a project analysis because it concentrates on safety services, that is only a part of what our city business is. We need to look not only at those services, they are the highest priority thing that we have in the city. So we need to look very seriously at those. But why are we coming down to an incremental funding method when it's the most important thing? What else is being funded above those items going forward? That needs to be something that citizens understand. This is the most important thing. The community service said so. You said so in your strategic planning deliberations. It should be the first thing funded, shouldn't it? I think, doing the project analysis is very illuminating, and I think Mark's got a very good model to go at that right now. But, when we talked about budget last year and we talked about the update earlier this year as well, revenues were doing fine, costs and expenses were on plan. Well, obviously we didn't fully appreciate what the overall cost of safety services would be. So we've underestimated that, and that's why we have to go out for this incremental funding. We're now entering the budget cycle, so we've got to do it from a governance standpoint as well. I reflect on this and say, okay, we can do this. We can go ahead and put an extra tax in. It's not going to be popular. It may well be effective, but the issues are the uncertainties around the scenarios that we're running here. And the uncertainties in terms of these scenarios are starting to be understood, and we can play the what-if game with them. But the uncertainties in terms of the total business of the city need to be put around this as well. So as we pull and push over here on safety services, we need to understand the impact in terms of the rest of the city as well. So I would say to you, we need an interactive model. We need much more involvement of the public in terms of what they're agreeing to here. And that model should be something where we can play the what-if game for everybody. Uncertainties and risks are huge here. But you knew that getting into this. But we need to think about other sources of revenue and generating those up. We cannot survive with the mix of revenues that we have now and get to pay down our debt. So, I really think that your effort around economic development becomes a very important lever for this city.
Please conclude your remarks, Mr. Hamer.
Yes, I will. And so economic development can be an extra revenue source and a stable revenue source as well. But lastly, I'll leave with you, we need public involvement. This has come rushing on the public in the last couple of weeks here. It's not going to be well received, and we need to help the public be supportive. Thank you.
That's all, Mayor.
Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I know I've not made any comments up to this point, and Mr. Hamer's comments have kind of propelled me to make some comments. We recently engaged in a community-wide survey, and those results showed overwhelmingly that the community is very much in favor of supporting public safety and open space and outdoor recreation. Those were their two highest priorities. We need to understand that both of those things are funded from the general fund. And what's the percentage mark of public safety through the general fund right now?
I believe it's like 75, 76%.
So currently, you look at our general fund, 75% of our general fund is going to police and fire right now without any tax increase. And if we don't do a tax increase, then how are we going to continue to provide parks, recreation, library, and other essential city services that are a high priority to our citizens? People come here because they enjoy the beauty of the area, the landscape, the habitats, the hikes, the biking, the opportunities. And this tax increase, in my mind, is essential so that we can continue to offer the other city services that we are currently providing. Because if we don't do anything, then according to Mr. Hamer, we're going to have to close libraries and shut down recreation facilities. And that's not what anybody wants, in my opinion, based on the community survey results. So I think that the community will be receptive to this request because it is a high priority. They said it was a high priority in their survey responses. And this is a way that we're going to be able to improve public safety while maintaining current city services. Thank you.
Councilman Gambogi.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. We could spend the rest of the evening either commenting or re-engineering, but can we make a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-1880?
I think that motion is appropriate at this time.
Second.
I didn't make the motion yet, but now I do. Now you can second it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Okay, since the last council meeting, I think it broke up without anybody being able to hear my closing comments.
We have one more agendized item, Mayor,
The BCTs, okay.
which I'll cover. So
I'm warning you, you're gonna hear it this time.
We will be on a monthly basis providing council liaison updates on our boards, commissions, and committees. As many of our citizens are aware, we have 26 active boards, commissions, and committees here in the city of Prescott, and each of our council members serve on one or more of those boards and commissions as a liaison for council. They're non-voting members of these commissions, and their role is to attend the meetings and provide reports back to council and feedback to the boards and commissions. I did have 2 council members get back to me and let me know that they have a couple of updates to provide. Mayor Pro Tem Cantelmi will provide a couple of updates on the Workforce Housing Committee, and Councilman Gambogi will provide updates on the General Plan Committee, the Board of Adjustment, the Water Issues Subcommittee, and our Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Traffic Advisory Committee. And I also wanted to highlight some of the upcoming meetings. As I said, we'll be doing this once a month, so I'll provide an update on the meetings of our boards and commissions that will be taking place over the next month and between that update, with the specification that some of the meeting dates are subject to change. We have some of our boards and commissions that have recurring schedules, but some of those meetings do get canceled if there are no items to discuss. So coming up, we have the scheduled April 11th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, April 12th Prescott Preservation Commission, April 16th the Airport Advisory Committee, April 17th, CDBG Citizens Advisory Committee, April 18th, Board of Adjustment, April 24th, Tourism Advisory Committee and General Plan Committee, April 25th, Planning and Zoning Commission, May 1st, Mayor's Veterans Commission, May 6th, Mayor's Charter Review Commission, May 7th, the Council Subcommittee on Water Issues, May 9th, Planning and Zoning Commission, May 10th, Prescott Preservation Commission, and May 13th, Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Traffic Advisory Committee.
Well, since my screen is frozen, you're going to have to raise your hand. So, Councilman Moore, you wanted to make comments on yours?
I just wanted to add to Sarah's list that there is also the special events meeting this Thursday at 9 a.m. I don't think you mentioned that one, but that's Thursday morning at 9 a.m.
I didn't. Thank you.
Sarah, and I'm going to add one more to mine. Also, I have the historic preservation update on the Whiskey Row Hotel, and I'll just be brief.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's start with the, I'm also the council liaison for the Workforce Housing Committee. And just some quick updates on that we continue to work towards tackling the problem. We're trying right now to bring the stakeholders together and understanding how to achieve the affordable dwelling units that we need. We applied, the good news is we applied for, and Amber's not in the room here, or Chelsea, I don't think, but we did apply for a $200,000 grant, which we finally did receive. And yeah, that's good news. Right now we're talking about using that grant money to hire somebody to facilitate this workforce housing issue all the way through, and we're hoping they might also possibly have the ability to do some looking into grant funding for that. So we continue to work on, we're going to take a field trip coming up real soon out to see a workforce housing development that has happened by the Pronghorn Group, so we will report back on that. I'm going to move on real quick to the Historic Preservation Committee. Many of you know we finally heard arguments about the new hotel on Whiskey Row, keeping in mind that the Preservation Commission turned the project down because of the massing issue. They did meet a couple of the requirements to build in the Historic Preservation District, but the biggest stumbling block was the massing. And Kaylee, I don't think she's here, Nunez, our historic preservationist, also invited an opinion by 2 of our bigger state historic preservation offices. One is SHPO, and I'm sure you've heard that, and that is the State Historic Preservation Office. National Parks is another one that weighed in. And again, the problem has been the massing. We did attempt to give the owner an opportunity to go back and to the drawing board. He declined. So at this point, the ball is in his court, and we're just going to wait and see what he has to say going forward about the project. And that's about it for us.
And then Councilman Gambogi, you did let me know that you had some updates on your boards and commissions.
I'd love to. I serve as liaison to, I think, 6. There's the Water Issues Subcommittee, there's the General Plan, there's the Pedestrian Bike Traffic Advisory Committee, the Board of Adjustment, the Planning Commission, and SIMPO NACOG. I'm going to give you a report on 4 of those. The first, in terms of the general plan, is an effort. We in the city do a lot of planning. I'm not sure that we always do a good job of coordinating the planning. So we recently had a meeting where we called together SIMPO, the general plan, the planning commission, and workforce housing. Because to use just one simple example, if we do a good job of workforce housing, more people will live in Prescott, and SIMPO has an easier time because there'd be less people driving 89 or 69 in the morning. And other people, like our fire chief, Holger, would have an opportunity, the better selling point to get firemen because they'd have some affordable housing in the city. On the water subcommittee, the clock is ticking. You know, we did a deal with in 2005 about replenishing the little Chino with the big Chino. We haven't done it yet, and now we're talking about grandfathered rights. So we'll be looking into that. I wanted to mention that on all these subcommittees, I've been amazingly impressed with the competency of the city staff. You know, someone asked me, what's it like being on the city council? I said, it's kind of like coming out of college, starting work. You're at the bottom of a very steep learning curve. And I find that the residents that volunteer for these boards and commissions work really well with the city staff. Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Traffic Committee, Hacienda Lane had a concern about speeding. The speed limit was 25, and the proposal to fix it was a rational one. The 85th percentile is way over 25, so moving it from 25 to 30 and then policing it is a good example of a solution between the HOA, the people who live on Hacienda Lane, and the city staff. And then finally, the Board of Adjustments is one of the great stories because we had a group of people from Prescott Canyon come to protest the proposal for a gasoline station on 69 because it would kind of be across the street from them. And the reason I use this as an example is I got up and publicly thanked them at the end because they were well organized and they were very professional in their presentation, and it was one of the most objective of meetings I've witnessed at Prescott since I've been here. So that's the report.
Thank you, Councilman Gambogi. That's all, Mayor.
And a darn good one, Councilman Gambogi. All right, so we're going to conclude this meeting with a quote from one of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. "The care of human life and happiness, and not their destruction, is the first and only object of good government." This meeting is adjourned.